Imagine walking into a room where everyone is richer than you. Better clothes, better job, more successful. Even if no one says anything, something in your brain changes. You speak a little bit less. You second guess what to say. You become more aware of how people are judging you. Now imagine the opposite. Everyone in the room works for you. Suddenly you speak more confidently. You interrupt people more often. You feel more comfortable making decisions. Nothing about your intelligence changed. Nothing about your personality changed. But your status did. And psychology experiments show when status changes, people change with it. Look around any human environment. You'll find a hierarchy. Schools have popular kids. Companies have executives. Online platforms have follower counts. Humans organize themselves into ranked social structures, almost automatically. For most of human history, this hierarchy was extremely important. If you were higher status in a tribe, you might get better food, more protection, more influence over decisions, and oftentimes more reproductive success, which means natural selection favors people who were sensitive to status. Research by primatologist Fran de Waal shows that chimpanzees maintain strict dominance hierarchies where ranked determines access to food and mates. And the behavior looks strangely familiar. Higher ranked chimps interrupt others, take better resources, display confidence, and lower ranked chimps show more caution and stress. Sounds familiar? Humans didn't invent hierarchy. We just built entire societies on top of it. So here's the question. If status changes how we think, does it also change how we behave in everyday situations? Let's dive in. Research from University of California, Berkeley tested this idea in a surprisingly simple way. They stood at pedestrian crossings and watched what drivers did when someone stepped onto the crossroads. The rule is clear. Cars must stop, but the researchers tracked something else. What kind of car that the driver was in? Economy cars, average cars, or luxury cars? And the results were strange. Drivers of expensive cars were significantly more likely to ignore pedestrians and keep driving. In fact, in some cases, nearly half of the luxury car drivers failed to stop. The study was led by psychologist Paul Piff, and his conclusion wasn't that wealthy people were bad. Instead, his research suggested something more subtle. Higher statuses can create a psychological sense of entitlement. When people get higher in the social hierarchy, they sometimes feel less constrained by rules. But I hear you, viewer. Maybe luxury car drivers behave differently because they are rich. So what happens if we create status completely at random? In another experiment, researchers invited players to play Monopoly. But this version of Monopoly was rigged. One player was randomly assigned the high status position. They started with twice as much money, better dice rolls, and more opportunities to collect rent. The other players had normal rules. Within minutes, the difference in behavior became obvious. Higher status players spoke louder, celebrated more aggressively, took up more space at the table, and sometimes mocked the other players, even though the advantage was completely random. But the most fascinating part happened after the game. When researchers asked the winners why they won, many didn't mention the advantage. Instead, they talked about their strategy and decision making. In other words, once people experienced higher status, they quickly started believing they deserved it. These experiments might seem like simple social behavior, but neurologists suggest something deeper might be happening. Status may actually influence how people's brains work. Research from institutions like University College of London and Harvard University has found that social rank can influence hormone levels. Higher status is often associated with higher testosterone levels, lower cortisol levels, and more confidence in decision making. Lower status people showed the opposite pattern. More stress, more threat awareness, more hesitation. In other words, the brain treats social hierarchy almost like a survival environment. When you feel higher status, your brain behaves as if it has more control. When you have lower status, your brain behaves as if the world is more dangerous. For most of human history, status exists within small social groups. Maybe 50 people in a tribe, maybe 1,000 in a town. But today, something very strange has happened. Social media has turned status into a global competition. Follower counts, luxury vacations, perfect lifestyles. Platforms that were meant for communications have accidentally become giant status scoreboards. You can open an app and instantly compare yourself to billionaires, celebrities, influencers, and millions of strangers. And our brains, which evolved for small tribes, now has to process a hierarchy of billions of people, which might explain why people feel constant pressure to show success, display wealth, and signal importance. The same instinct that once determined who ate first in a tribe now drives people to compete for likes and followers. We like to think humans are rational, that we make decisions based off of logic or morality, but psychology suggests something simpler might be happening. Deep down, our brains evolved in a world where status meant survival, so we constantly scan the social environment for one thing: where do I rank? That ranking quietly influences how confident we feel, how much risks we take, how we treat people below us, and how we behave around other people. The strange part isn't human beings caring about status. It's that this ancient instinct is carrying over into the modern world. Global social media, massive wealth inequality, and billions of people competing for attention, which means the hierarchy our brains evolved for no longer exists. We still react to it though. And the uncomfortable possibility is this: a lot of human behavior that looks like ambition, confidence, or success might actually be our brains trying to climb that social ladder. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.